Good evening, everybody. This is the Planning Board for the September 5th, 2023 meeting. First, I will introduce the members of the Planning Board. Down to my extreme left is Von Dugan. Sitting next to Von is Roger Murray. Doug Breskin is the Vice Chairman of the Planning Board. To my right, John Thurston. And next to him is Jane Nielsen, who is an alternate. Brad Harriman is a representative from the Board of Selectmen on the Planning Board. And Julie Jacobs, who is also an alternate. The first item on the agenda is for Brewster Academy, which was continued from August 15th, 2023. Julie and Jane sat on that application, so according to our rules of procedure, they do have the right to continue if you want to continue. Julie, is that okay? And
Yes, please.
Okay, Jane?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that John Thurston and Von Dugan will not be voting, but they can ask any questions that they want to. So, okay, everybody? Okay, the first item, as I said, Brewster Academy, 8 Academy Drive, tax map and lot 218-150, case number 2023-13. This is for a site plan review for a permanent ice rink, which was, as I said before, continued from August 15th. Just before we get going, I'd like to make some suggestions for the applicant. Brewster is in the ROI district. Schools are a permitted use in that district. But they do need to comply with the site plan regulations, which is why we're here. But if you could address some of the following issues, and then other planning board members may have others. The original application, you said 8 o'clock was the time you would be willing to stop. You need to tell us if that's still the case. Reducing the sound of the mechanical units, you did submit a fencing at the last meeting, and so if you've got any more information on how much it decreases the noise for the mechanical units, that would be great. Banging of the pucks. That seems to have been an issue that was brought up by the neighbors, and I'd like to know if you've given any consideration to a sound barrier. You had indicated at the last meeting no PA system, and I'm assuming that's still the case. Do you have any additional information that you could share with us on the Saturday events that we talked about at the last meeting? Your engineer is here, and there were a couple questions that had come up that she said she would address. One of them was about the removal of the nitrogen and phosphorus. The issue of the lights came up. Some of the neighbors said that they were bothered by the lights because it reflected into their property. It seems that if you were to look at the landscape regulations, it says that the reason for landscaping and buffering is to make sure that noise and other glare and things of that nature do not bother neighboring property owners. So you could speak to that. Also, the other issue that came up was, had you considered any issues of other locations for this rink? So you could answer those questions. Anybody else have anything, or do you want him to go ahead? Oh, okay, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I
If I could.
Oh, okay.
So we were just handed several page thick document. The first page says Brewster Outdoor Hockey Rink proposed responses to address neighbor concerns. And there's certainly 10 or 15 pages in here, so certainly we'd like to have the time to review it.
Yeah.
Okay, Jane.
We just
go
got
ahead.
it. Yeah. We just got it.
Okay, yep, go ahead.
Good evening, members of the Planning Board. My name is Susan Harrington. I am the Chief Financial Officer at Brewster Academy. Doug, thank you for your question. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about purpose. We have spent the past 2 weeks working on responding to all of the concerns that were brought forth in the April 15th meeting. And we've had 2 weeks to put that together amidst opening school. So apologies that you're getting the packet this evening, but we plan on going through each point in great detail and addressing every concern that you just raised, Kathy. As we've talked with many of our neighbors, we are always striving to be a good community member in the town of Wolfeboro. In September of 2022, September 20th, we received approval for either a one-season facility or a multi-year facility with full site plan review. We came to you on August 15th seeking that approval for a full site plan, prepared to talk about stormwater without any knowledge that the experience for our surrounding neighbors was less than positive. So we've heard those concerns, we've responded to each of them, and we hope that the plan that we've put in place is agreeable to those neighbors. Just briefly to talk about the purpose of the rink, when the Pop Whalen Arena was undergoing renovations and realized that they were going to have some schedule delays, we were faced with the challenge of rehoming our varsity hockey program for both our boys and girls team, which meant that we could potentially lose our boys and girls hockey program if we didn't have a facility for them to play in for practices and for games for at least half of the season. So we received that one season approval with many variances to give us time, 1 year, to get a multi-year approval with a full site plan review. We had that rink in place for practices for our boys and girls teams last year. It helped our programs grow, and it actually attracted a pretty substantial interest in junior varsity hockey for boys and both girls. And so the purpose of the rink going forward would be for practices for those junior varsity programs. We are not looking to disengage with Pop Whalen in any way, shape, or form. We'll be using Pop Whalen for varsity practices, varsity games, and junior varsity games. The rink will be used for those junior varsity practices as well. We'll get into the dates and details of for what we refer to as Winter Classic game days over the course of the winter. And potentially some community events that members of the community have expressed interest in, for example, first night on New Year's Eve. So the rink will help to facilitate the growth of our junior varsity program, which has become a very important component of the Brewster community and our economical model. And so we're going to now respond to all of the concerns that were raised by neighbors, point by point. And Peter Gilligan, I think that's you.
Thank you, Susan. Peter Gilligan, I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Brewster Academy. Give me a moment, please. I'm going to leave it. We just want to reiterate what Susan said. You know, we strive to be the best neighbors we can. We want to tell our neighbors that we have already spoken with many of them in person, as was requested by, recommended by Kathy. Some of those conversations seemed to go pretty well in understanding when we were able to talk one-on-one. We just want to, further just dedicate ourselves to being the best neighbors we can, and we're hoping that this comprehensive plan that we got together can get us there. So maybe we could break them down one by one. As you see in your packet before you, all sort of follow along with it. And the rest of the 15 pages, Doug, is just backup for what the things that we're saying there. So I'm not going to read for 15 pages. I'll save you guys all that.
Thank you.
So one of the first things that we're talking about is rationale for location, right? We understand that the neighbors along Green Street wish there could be an alternative location for the outdoor rink. We carefully explored all available options with the firm we work with, Andy Smith, who's here from DSK, and helps us with our campus master planning as well as designing our buildings. All other locations, based on the grade of our lot, they're being utilized for other activities and community event spaces. We invested time and resources into the current location to keep that compaction level at what it needs to be to have a rink and to keep a very extremely level surface. It also has available parking right at the adjacent parking lot at Anderson Hall, and it's right between the Smith Center and Anderson Hall for things like bathrooms, changing areas for the kids, and things of that nature. So as far as location goes, I think, happy to answer any questions on that, or if you'd like, I can read through and then we can take questions after, whatever you guys would like to do.
Well, I would suggest you have this document separated into rationale for location, light concerns, landscaping concerns, and noise concerns. And I would suggest that it might be easier for the board if we address one at a time.
Yep,
Right.
sounds right to me. So as far as rationale for location, I think we laid out a pretty good last time at the meeting on the 15th, and then for today we kind of given you the process that we went through to determine that location.
Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Julie.
I took a drive around in between soccer and what's going on now. I'm not convinced that you don't have a better place to put it. I personally could see you swapping out the hockey rink with the soccer field. That would be easy. You're going to have to do a little bit of work either way. I see, in my mind, that looks like it might work. There's a whole lot of fields down towards where Great Waters used to have their tents in the summer. There's a lot of land down that way. There's also, if you just take the rink and kind of twist it, shove it over closer to all of the stuff on campus and get it away from Green Street, that might even work. So I see, personally, I see where it's at right now is still a want. It was easy to put it there because it was empty, and you could immediately put it on there temporarily. But in the whole plan of many, many, many years, I feel a different spot might be more beneficial, and more beneficial to the kids too. Now they have to hike to it. Whereas if you put it in another spot, it might be a little bit easier for them to get from the athletic center across the street to where they need to go.
Yep, I understand, from maybe to drive around, look at it, but we had a comprehensive study done with engineers and architects to find the right spot, and that's the spot that we came up with. So, we also looking for other spots, and that was the best location that the rink could go at, for all of the reasons that I stated before.
Anybody else want to ask questions about location?
Did cost come into your consideration about where to put it?
I think cost is always a consideration, certainly with moving it. It's when you think about a structure of this size and what you have to do to the ground to have it ready to receive that structure, it's an incredible, it's an expensive and time-consuming undertaking to get it done. When you think about the grade of our property, right, from Main Street to the lake is about 80 foot of grade drop, right? So when you try to think about a level surface that's 200 feet long by 85 feet wide that can't be off by more than a quarter inch from corner to corner, there's not a suitable location that isn't already used for something else, like a soccer field or a baseball field or tennis courts.
But where those other places are, that's not written in stone. I mean, it is possible to move things around.
Oh, okay, go ahead, John.
So this is an unfortunate incident for me because I was actually on Brewster Academy property today, and I was talking with a gentleman who does dirt work and site work, and I wanted to try to get a little insight on other areas, and I was approached by a Brewster Academy gentleman with a beard and blue Sprinter van, and he asked me to get off the property, and I asked him, I said, we were discussing business stuff, and so I apologized to him and drove off, and so, I can relate to those letters that these folks wrote that sometimes say it's all about them. I was a little discouraged. I wanted to look into it further. I wanted to talk with somebody who did work on the property. He was disgusted, and I had to drive off. And
Did you happen to get a name, John?
I didn't get a name. He took pictures of my truck and so forth. And so maybe I wasn't doing what he thought, but you know, I tried to get there today and look around and come up with some ideas and get history and insight. So I'm a little discouraged about this plan.
Yeah, so I oversee all campus security, and as you all know, although Brewster Academy is 100% private land, we open up our entire campus to everyone in the community, unless they're in areas where it might be deemed suspicious or something along those lines in a building area. It's also the first day of school classes for kids, so generally I can't speak to who it was. If you got a name, I could help work through that. You know, there's not too many people with beards in the facilities department. I can speak to them. But John, if you're ever on campus, come find me. I'll give you a tour all around campus, right? So instead of set an appointment, if you want to have something structured like that where you walk around campus, happy to host you anytime.
Go ahead, Roger.
Hey, Roger.
I guess I had a slightly different experience this morning because I parked in the Anderson Hall parking lot, wandered around the hockey rink, looked at it from all directions, and nobody bothered me in the slightest.
Yep.
But if you move this over to the soccer field by Clark Road, then you'd have an issue with the neighbors over there, I would assume.
Yep.
And it would seem to me that there would be environmental issues if you tried to locate it on the other soccer field down by the lake. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but it doesn't seem to me that would be a good location.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good assessment. You know, I think also when you think about giving up a soccer field is 100 feet longer than a hockey rink, and there wouldn't be the adequate space in that location to put a soccer field. And then we may be talking about issues with people on Green Street for the soccer. You know, and soccer is it's used for a longer season. You know, we all like a dog with different fleas. We kind of is a term that I'd use for that.
One of the bullet points in your note here says that for the rationale for location, it has available parking in the Anderson Hall lot. Do you expect much car traffic there?
Only for those 4 Winter Classic days that we lay out in further on down in the noise concern side. So only for those do we see those for the Winter Classics that we want to have, and for events like First Night, where we open up our campus to the community for open skates and things of that nature.
Okay, why don't you go on to light concerns,
Yep.
which is...
Andy, would you bring up the light sign? So certainly light concerns came up at the last meeting, so we tackled it head on. We have Tony here from Longchamps. He's a VP of Longchamps here if we need an expert opinion on this and assessment. What we came up with and as we talked, and actually Julie had this idea, so I can't take this as my own. You know, the light concerns, what we've done is, Doug brought up that the lights have to be at 20 feet. So we worked with our lighting engineers, and they're a little bit higher than that. We agree we'll definitely bring them down to 20 feet, which would help a little bit. But schedule, right? So the significance of the schedule. Now the idea that, Kathy, you had brought this up in your opening monologue, but we want to reduce the hours that we're using it. So instead of going from all non-quiet hours, the idea would be that we would have, so we would have, 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. on weekdays, with the lights going off on an automatic timer at 8:30. That doesn't mean that they stay on till 8:30 every night, but they would be on a timer in case they end at 6 and shut them off at that point. And then for Saturdays, it would be 7 to 10, but no hockey after 8:30. And then for Sunday, to stay in line with the quiet hours that Wolfeboro has, it would be 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. with no hockey after 8:30. And we think that significantly reduced schedule will help with light permeation like that. We also did a photometric assessment done, because there can't be any more than 1 foot candle power or 0.2 foot candle power off of our property. And it's a little tough to see, and you can come up and see it, but this shows a full assessment of what the current lighting at 20 feet would be for for that photometric study. And it shows no significant light off of our property to any of the corresponding properties.
Yep, go ahead.
So last time you talked about connecting to the house property on Green Street, but the discussion was that you didn't meet the setback, but it kind of looks like that dirt goes down around to that house over there. Did you ever do connection to that house?
I think what you're talking about is probably the house on Estabrook Drive, because one of the questions from one of the community members was, could we move it towards Estabrook further? And we have a setback issue on that side as well.
I think it was on the left-hand corner of the parking lot, and I think Susan made comment that they could do something with the property, but the question came up, were you doing a boundary line adjustment? The question is relative to where you're calling the boundary. I'm just trying to figure that out.
No, we currently have the rink is situated in with the proper setbacks from the boundary lines on the Green Street properties.
Are you talking about the shed or the?
I don't know what's back there, because
okay.
I
All right.
see the ground, it's all high, and it goes left to the back corner back there. I mean, the rink is all built up, and it kind of curves into that back behind Al Pierce's house there, and so I'm trying to. Did you connect to those houses for services back there or anything?
There's no services that are connected from those houses. Nope. Last year we put the Zamboni shed on a separate property that we have, and that's where we put that because of just trying to figure out the same thing with setbacks. Maybe that's what you're thinking about was the Zamboni shed from the previous year in September.
Right.
Okay, I'll carry on.
Okay.
And
So along with lowering the light poles, we're also talking about planting a line of trees in the front, which you would be if you were thinking about it here, and if you wouldn't mind switching back. Kind of along to Roger's point, we would plant on the green line that runs vertical on here. You could see that's where we'd be planting a line of trees and bushes that would then grow up and help reduce the glare that you would see from Main Street and be able to grow up over time to actually go up over where the boards are and possibly the glass as well. Another part that we had talked about was a property line fence to clearly delineate what's the end of the Green Street property and the beginning of Brewster's property. And maybe this also speaks to your point, John, right? So what we want to do is one of our things we would do is put about a 330-foot long, 8-foot cedar fence that would clearly delineate that line. And we talked with some of the different members. Al Pierce already has a fence there, so it would replace his fence that's fallen down with a nice one that he would have on his side. And then we talked with people about how that would be. And it would be a clear delineation, so we could not possibly go over our property line with snow. So I think that was one of those.
Is that the red line?
That's the red line that you see there, right? So the red horizontal line, right? And we would continue to use the dark sky compliance lights as required. And what we came up with today with working with Tony, we were trying to come up with a plan for how to mitigate that light a little more, even though we know that due to that photometric study, we're still meeting the standards that Wolfeboro has asked us to meet, but there are these things called barn doors, and think of it as a little blinder that can go on the light in the back, and we'd put those on the Green Street side, so that light wouldn't be able to, so when you're looking directly at a light line of sight, you wouldn't see the light. So not necessarily that the foot candles are coming onto your property, but you wouldn't see it, right? Because it would be blocked by what they call these little barn doors. And we would also, when you think about it, we limit by nature of the rink being a hockey rink that's outdoors and it's ice, it's only on for about 4.5 months a year. So I think that's another part that's an advantage. For the entire rest of the year, lights are not on at that location because it's not getting used. So maybe pause there for if you guys want to have any more questions than John had about lighting.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, just ask a question and don't argue, okay?
Okay, okay. So you are planting trees, and you've mentioned the fact that in time they would grow to blocks. How many years do you think that would take?
I think it's a tough assessment to make, Jane. But I think we would plant them the largest that we could with what would be proper for the plant, for the tree that would be there. And then over time, just like any tree, it would just grow depending on sunshine and light, as the trees do.
Have you chosen a species?
Well, we work with Brochu on that and they're who handles a lot of our landscaping on campus. We haven't chosen anything yet, but the idea would be something that is green, that stays green all year, so that it's there in the winter. I'm sorry, spruce and rhododendrons. We did choose that. I apologize. So, is that okay for John? That's positive?
Spruce won't get eaten by the deer.
All right, we got John's approval on the landscaping. I think we're already moving in the right direction. Any other questions
Okay.
on lighting?
Okay, why don't you
Okay,
go
so we
on
can
to
go on to
landscape?
landscape concerns. One of the things that we talked about last time was about the landscaping of the property. And I think anybody can understand on a project like this, until you get full approval, you don't put your money into landscaping like that. We fully plan on doing that, and here's the plan that we've laid out. We heard that you want to see landscaping improvements, as do we. And it would be not only just for aesthetics, but also blocks light and sound. So as we spoke about, you plant the line of trees and bushes along Anderson Hall parking lot, and that would mask it a lot from the Main Street side. Install a property line fence that we spoke about, so we kind of already went down this rabbit hole here, but property line fence for that 300 feet that you see in the red, that would be on, starting just after Topsides, because they have their own fence and a little gate there. We wouldn't want to interfere with that, and we talked with Denny about that, and he was comfortable with starting it on the tree that starts right on the other side, and it would be a clear line of demarcation for that. And this would really ensure that no snow is getting pushed onto anyone's property. And Denny and I spoke today, and I actually invited him to meet me out there at the first snowstorm so we can go over it to make sure that, and he has my personal cell phone number, so that when we have if he has any issues or anything with snow, we can go out there and talk to him. And I open that up to anybody else that's on that Green Street side.
Okay, any questions about landscape?
Okay. Noise concerns.
Yep.
So obviously we heard some concerns about noise, and we came to you last time. We had a little bit of a view of this before the meeting, so we came with the ideas for the sound mitigation around the chiller. But we've gone further than that and come up with a comprehensive plan. I'll kind of speak back to the schedule. Julie had this idea last time about a schedule. She said, if you had a schedule and people knew where it was going to be, that would really make it better for people to understand when they came. And that we listened to that, and we agree. So keeping those hours that we had said from 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. Monday to Friday, meaning lights out at 8:30 p.m. at the latest. If hockey's over at 6, the lights go off at 6. But no matter what, the overarching timer will always turn them off at 8:30. And then for Saturdays would be the same 7 to 10 p.m., but with no hockey after 8:30. And the same thing, 10 p.m. would be the automatic shutoff, but if they're done at 6 p.m., they'll shut the lights down. And then with Sunday, matching with the town's noise ordinance, we would make sure that nothing before 10 o'clock, and the same thing, and we go till 8:30 p.m. on Sunday. So closing it down, because the reality is none of our kids aren't going to be out there past 8:30 at 10, so why ask for 10 when we're not going to be using that, right?
Yeah, last time you said that it was, if somebody didn't turn it off, it just automatically went off.
Yep.
But, I mean, how are you going to get these turned off at 8:30?
It's just an automatic setting. So the
So
system,
that's automatic?
the system can be automatic. So think of that as
And the weekends?
Yep. Think of that as the system that
Okay.
would turn it off at the latest. So the latest would be that time. But when the hockey team is done and everything is done with the rink, it gets turned off then. And then the timer is there as a catch-all, just in case, right? We think that this established schedule will help with some of the noise from the pucks and things like that. We also talked about providing an open schedule, a website that anybody can get from the public to see when our practices would be. And I think we have to just have a little understanding that sometimes practices, due to weather and an outdoor rink, we have to ebb and flow, but we could keep that updated so the residents of Green Street and the residents of the town would know when we're having that practice and to expect noises from pucks and alike, right? So, and cheering and of that kind of nature that's on there.
Okay, so this really isn't just for the JV.
Well, I mean, absolutely. It's not necessarily just for the JV, but its primary use case is the JV program. Right now, the Pop Whalen, in the times that we would need, cannot accommodate another team for JV. So this would be, we'd still have our varsity practices there. I'm sure that our varsity team would practice on it as well sometimes, because it's a resource that's right on campus. But we wouldn't be taking away from anything at the Pop. In fact, because of the rise of the JV program, we'd be using more time at the Pop.
Okay.
Yep. For games, right? So the JV program for games, that we'd have more time for that in the future as our JV programs continues to evolve.
Okay.
But some of this is going to be free skating?
Yeah, sometimes like we have an open free skate where we open up our campus to the public with, as long as they have a helmet on and sign a waiver. We did it at first night. We actually organized that with Linda to have people come by as part of first night. Whatever we could do to open it up for the town, we'd be happy to do that.
So would you do a special exception for a first night scenario on planning board members?
John, I would personally bring you on there for sure, right? And I'll make sure that nobody.
No, I'm saying the planning board should be open to a first night situation where it goes past, I mean, if it says 8 o'clock,
Well, I think that as a member of the Wolfeboro community, you could absolutely be there, John, and every one of you, right? But maybe a
No,
little.
I think what John's referring to is you have limits on the hours of operation, and if you're going to have something on first night, he's suggesting that you might want to have it after 10 o'clock.
I think it would probably still be within the bounds of those hours, unless the town said, hey, we want to open it up later than that, you know?
just want the board to know that we should be flexible if they want to work with the town and have a good development.
Certainly, if the town wanted to have free skate all the way until midnight and we got a variance for that, we'd open that up as long as it was okay with our neighbors, right?
Although, John, I will tell you that I believe the majority of the first night activities end by 9 p.m.
There you go, right? So we're getting closer every time, right? So I think one of the things that we have on here, no PA system, right? So we don't have any PA systems for any of our outdoor fields. You know, sometimes we'll bring out some external speakers for the soccer field if we're doing something like that with a little bit, but on this field, we'd make sure that we didn't have any of that, no PA system at all that would be there. And I think the final piece, which is why we left it for last, is sort of the technical part, right? So we had a sound engineering study done where to get the decibel rating of the chiller at 150 feet away from the chiller, and that decibel rating at 150 feet away is 53 decibels. Our closest neighbor, who's Al Pierce, is about 320 feet away. So what we did was we said, let's go with the closest, cut it in half, and meet that standard, because I think that the people of Green Street and all of our neighbors are owed that. So already it's at 53 decibels, and there's this fun little chart, if you look through your packet, that'll show you what 53 decibels is equivalent to. And me talking on this microphone is more than that, right? So, but let's not stop there, right? So we are still going to, this is as is right now in its current form. But we would still bring in the sound dampening system that would be around the entire chiller, and that could, and to Jane's point, she was looking for specifics. But 53 decibels is pretty specific, and I think the idea is that the sound damping installation could get that down to half. So, so about 26.5 decibels. I think, but ambient noise is about 40 decibels. So anything lower than that, I think, if you can get it to that at our property lines, I think we're doing a really good service to get it there. So that's where it's a little difficult, because the rules don't really give us something. It doesn't quantify what we have to be at for a rating. But I think if you look at that chart and you look at where we're at 53, with the push to get it to half of that, I think that shows that not only we're trying to take the noise down, we're trying to do even more above and beyond what would be required by the town.
Did you look into the noise that the pucks make when they hit
the walls? Yeah.
So we did, and I think the only way to address that, we looked at every sort of possible way, and there's just no way to have a puck hitting glass to make it quieter, right? So kind of going back to Julie's point, where the schedule, I think, can help with that, where those are the noises that are the toughest for people to hear. If you know when it's going to happen, it's easier to know that it's there. And I think the hope is that with opening up that schedule, with making sure people are informed, our neighbors are informed about when activity will be on that rink that would be hockey. We think that that's really the only thing we could do, because there was no mitigation that would make any type of substantial change once we really dug into it with the engineers. And Susan has a little more to that I think she can speak to, that you'll understand how much work we did with that to try and get the sound all around down.
All right, well, I would propose that we address the noise from the pucks and the noise from the chiller separately. And you started off first on the chiller, so why don't we continue on that line?
I think I'll let Susan speak to that with the chiller. The pucks, like we said, is there's no intervention that you can do that'll make any type of substantial change to it. So, we worked with the president of the company that did our ice rink, and we came up with the best solutions that we can. I think the schedule, the reduced hours is a good, the most we can do, and that's what we're doing.
And the games that you'll be having will be on Saturday in the afternoon?
Yep, and if you see in your packet, I didn't know if it was necessary to call it out, but we did pick 4 dates for that, right?
Yeah, that's...
A couple of them are Wednesdays and Fridays, but we can switch them to Saturdays if needed to be all Saturdays. I actually had I had our athletic director get me dates that would be Saturdays, and he sent them over to me here, because, it's a lot to do the schedule. You have weather, because it's an outdoor rink. You have the other team, what's going on with them and where they are. But those dates could be Saturday the 13th, Saturday January 13th, Saturday January 20th, Saturday February 3rd, and Saturday February 10th. I'm sorry, February 3rd and February 10th. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied.
I'm sorry, are you saying that they would not be the 4 dates that are shown in the memo?
Right now, it's either those, or if you guys said, hey, they have to be on Saturdays, we have the backup for the Saturdays, right? So
And absolutely only during the daytime.
that's what we're pushing for, is daytime only, because then you're not having then you're not having that a game at night, and that's, I think, a little more intrusive than it is a game during the day. That's our intention.
So did this go from 2 games to 4?
What
I
we
thought
had-
last time you just mentioned a couple.
What we had said was, well, I think it's sort of up in the air. Now that you asked us for specificity, we went back to our athletic director. He came back to us with these 4 dates as days as possibilities.
I think at the last meeting you had said a couple of games, but it was not specific.
We weren't.
Right.
Yeah, they're just
Yeah.
Right.
twice.
So, all right, if you guys have any questions, we'll let Susan take the floor.
Yeah, Susan, before you start, so you had gone through the first 2 points in this memo from Everything Ice. The first was introduction, and one of the things it mentions, I just want to be clear for everybody, it reads, given the absence of established sound ordinances in the community. We do have sound ordinances, but they are qualitative rather than quantitative.
Right, I think that's the key word that's missing from that sentence
Yes,
there.
well,
given the
and I bring that up
absence of
because it's mentioned later in the document.
standards, right.
Yes, that's right. And then you had mentioned that the initial sound level is 53 decibels, which is considered moderately loud, and I'm wondering by what standard you use that it's rated moderately loud?
So if you take a look at the graphic that we included in the packet, it gives you a rundown of noises across the spectrum. And what we're saying is danger zone and/or moderately loud is anything above the 80 decibels. So it starts with a truck, moving up to a helicopter, all the way down to firework being the loudest noise. And this was provided by the engineers that work for Everything Ice, which is the company that installed the rink for us.
So this is the document you're referring to for the
Yeah.
loudest. And
Yeah.
Can you tell me the origin of this?
Again, this was generated by the engineers that work for the company Everything Ice that installed the rink for us.
So can I assume it's their subjective opinion as to what it is? It's not from a...
I can't comment on to whether it's a subjective or an objective opinion, but we went to the experts that installed the rink for us.
Okay.
And they have installed outdoor facilities in New York City. They have mitigated sounds in very public areas and know what they're talking about.
Great. And then lastly, it was mentioned that the background community noise level is 40 decibels, and I'm wondering where that was measured.
This is universal standards. So this isn't specific to the town of Wolfeboro because there is no specific quantitative measure in the town of Wolfeboro.
Thank you.
So he applied universal standards. So if I could just respond to a couple of comments. Vaughn, you had asked about evening games. Winter Classics, which are the games that we are planning to schedule, which we talked about being 2 for the girls and 2 for the boys, which is why you're getting the 4 dates, are traditionally daytime games. And as a former hockey player, I can speak to the dangerous nature of games being played under lights. So there's the noise issue, there's the inconvenience to neighbors of having games in the evening, but there's also a safety component as well. So we are not planning to schedule any games in the evening hours. And I think that answered your question as well.
Okay,
Just a clarification from Tavis, the noise ordinance is at 11 o'clock at night?
10.
10? So,
Yeah, well, within the quiet hours. So if we could just reference the document that Doug was just talking about from Everything Ice, I'd just like to highlight a couple of paragraphs around the chiller. This was a topic that we had the fortunate...
Which one are you talking about, the Everything Ice?
The Everything Ice letter,
Okay.
right here.
All right.
It's a 3-page document. I'm just going to highlight a few paragraphs from that document. But we had the good fortune of
We
being
haven't seen
notified...
this, that's why we're asking these.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of that question.
She said she hasn't
We
seen it yet.
haven't seen this.
Right, and I'm going to walk you through a few paragraphs that are
Okay.
really important for the chiller. We had the good fortune of being notified that there was a neighbor who experienced some reduced quality of living as a result of the chiller prior to the August 15th meeting, and we had some time to start planning a noise barrier around that. Following that meeting, we heard where other neighbors were at around the chiller, and so we did this in-depth study about ways that we could further reduce the noise. And so I'm just going to read the first couple of paragraphs and then show you the proposed sound barrier that Everything Ice is recommending, where we are and where we'll end up once that's installed. So the outdoor rink serves as a valuable resource for the community, providing recreational opportunities for individuals at all ages. However, the noise generated by the chiller associated with the ice rink has been reported as exceeding the desired sound levels for the surrounding environment. Everything Ice wishes to explore with Brewster Academy a comprehensive strategy for reducing the sound levels produced by the chiller with the objective of minimizing noise disturbances for nearby residents and users of the facility. The unique challenge, as Doug just pointed out, in this context is the absence of defined quantitative sound ordinances in the community, which makes compliance with noise standards subjective rather than quantitative. And so the rink offers a place for community members to engage in ice-related activities. As we mentioned, the noise generated by the chiller system can introduce challenges to the tranquility of the area. And given the absence of any quantitative sound ordinances, these are based on principles of sound reduction and universal standards. So if we want to just get into the specifics of the sound barrier, the letter is 3 pages. We're actually going to skip past Appendix B and the inlet water connection. And this is a slightly cut off page, but the cut off page you don't need. What you see here is a cinder block with sound absorbing material inside, which will result in a sound reduction of at least 50% from the 150-foot line. So we're at 53 decibels at 150 feet from the property line, or from the chiller, excuse me. The noise-reducing materials and the cinder blocks and the design of the barrier will reduce by at least 50% according to this document. On the next page, you can see the wall around the chiller is 3-sided. What you can't see here is that it's 3 feet above the size of the chiller, thereby blocking noise from traveling towards the neighbors on Green Street and Clark. The total height? Yeah, did I not say height? Sorry, 3 feet above the height, not the sides. My apologies. Thanks, Andy.
Do you know what the outside finish of the cinder block walls will be?
EVIS, yeah. We haven't defined what that is. Some sort of EVIS or painted cinder block. And it's not visible from the road. It's set back lower than Main Street.
I'm aware it's not visible from the road. I was thinking about the neighbors.
Yep. Any questions about
Nope.
that
Any
mitigation
questions?
measure? Great.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
I think we actually have just one last statement, if we could, if you would entertain that. Sorry, just bear with me, get my notes together. We have heard the concerns of the neighbors. We appreciate the community's support. We're hopeful that these proposed challenges satisfactorily addresses the concerns that were raised at the last meeting. We have an open door policy. If the experience is less than positive, we want to address those concerns in real time. We're hopeful that we obtain approval in order to support our junior varsity hockey athletes for the 23-24 hockey season, and thank you for your consideration.
Susan, before you finish,
Thank you.
one more question relating to noise. You had spoken earlier, or there's there's been several comments about the pucks hitting the glass.
Yep.
I don't know enough about hockey to know how high the wall is as opposed and where the glass starts. But I'm wondering what portion of the pucks hit the wall rather than the glass. I'm assuming the puck hits the wall more often than the glass. And if that's the case, is there something that could be applied to the wall to dampen that sound?
Yeah, at the last meeting, we had talked about a foam barrier that may reduce the noise. Upon further research, the reduction in noise is very minimal and actually causes significant damage to the boards. So we could go through the process of damaging our boards to have a very subjective reduction in noise, not impact the neighbors in any way, shape, or form. So we thought it more important to reduce the hours of hockey practicing and publish that schedule as Julie had suggested so that neighbors know when to expect the sound of pucks hitting boards or glass. I don't know the breakdown. If I'm playing, it's probably up above the glass. But I don't know the breakdown of boards versus glass.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So I just went online to look at pucks, and I played hockey with the gentleman that I was talking with about earlier, and we were discussing different things, and the noise relates to the puck. They're aiming for the net, okay, and the net won't make much noise when the puck makes it into the net. But if you're errant and you have like everybody all lined up and they're all shooting at once, boom, 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 there's no rhyme or reason to it. But sometimes what you do is you get soft pucks, and soft pucks kind of play like real pucks. They're not really. So from a hockey connoisseur, yeah, it's not really the real thing, but I'm wondering if that's a possibility also in a heavy practice event.
I would have to talk with our athletic director about what impact that might have on programming and whether or not that's an option. As also a hockey player, I've never heard of these pucks, but I'm really interested because my daughter makes a lot of noise with the real puck. So a possibility that we could have that conversation with the athletic director, maybe tailored around the hours that are most intrusive.
Some of the pucks are really hardcore on the outside, and then other ones have a little bit of a rubber outer texture to them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You might want to use the word practice puck,
Yeah,
like there's
right.
practice tennis balls.
Right.
They're not quite the same, but they're for practice.
It's worth asking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, stormwater runoff, we had some questions.
Hello, my name is Joanne Coppinger. I'm with RFS Engineering. And Mr. Murray, last meeting, had a question about stormwater treatment. So I looked up your rules, and I knew it met the letter of the law, but it wasn't included in the report the last time. So what the NHDES says, your rules, actually, I quoted them in this little write-up, which you all had ahead of time. Your rules say that runoff from impervious surfaces shall be treated to achieve at least 80% removal of total suspended solids and at least 50% removal of both total nitrogen and total phosphorus using appropriate treatment measures. And then it did say, as specified in the New Hampshire Stormwater Manual, Volumes 1 and 2. So, New Hampshire Stormwater Manual, Volumes 1 and 2 say that infiltration trenches provide 90% removal of total suspended solids, 55% removal of total nitrogen, and 60% removal of total phosphorus. So if you recall, the stormwater system that was designed for this, there are 200 feet long, 24-inch diameter perforated pipes on either side of the rink. And the stormwater runoff from the rink is directed, and these pipes are put in crushed stone wrapped in fabric, is directed to those. And those each hold 4,700 gallons of stormwater. So as you most of the stormwater for your smaller storms will get, smaller to moderate storms will get completely infiltrated, and there won't be any runoff. Another question that was asked of me, and it's not in this write-up, but it was just a matter of curiosity, I think, is what about when the ice melts? Will the stormwater system be able to handle that runoff? And so I did the calculations, and if you can imagine a torrential rain, that's a lot of water on that surface. So if the ice all melted in March on a 40-degree day in 24 hours, the system that would be roughly equivalent to a 1-inch storm, a little bit more, but only not nearly as much as a 1-year storm. So the worst storm that we could expect in 1 year, and yes, these numbers are updated for the recent storm events we've been having, it would be more than a 1-inch storm, but less than a 1-year storm, significantly less than a 1-year storm. And the pipes and the system were designed to handle a 50-year storm event. So I hope that answers that question.
Roger, did that address the issue you had?
Yes, I think you've answered my questions. Your short answer is that yes, what you've designed meets the town standards and the stormwater regulations.
That is correct.
So before you go, the board received a letter from Amy Hines at 22 Green Street with concerns about the building of the permanent ice rink, and part of her letter reads that she has a neighbor who had to wait for the monstrous ice pile to melt in order to plant his garden. So I'm wondering how big that ice pile is, where it's located, and if in fact the runoff from it affected an abutting lot.
Oh, well, that's a new question. So I assume she's referring to the Zamboni ice shaving pile.
I would assume so, yes.
I'm not prepared to answer that particular question. That's a new question, but I don't know if anyone from Brewster can answer that. I imagine it's just wet in the spring and probably exacerbates that general area, but maybe someone that knows more about it.
Yeah, I would assume you're correct, and I just got this letter half an hour ago, so it's new to me as well. The last line in that same paragraph asks, are there chemicals we need to worry about? I'm assuming it's just water. Is that correct?
They said correct, yes, just water.
Thank you.
So I have a question.
Are you going to address the ice? Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. That's fine.
Yeah.
So I think, what we had with the ice pile, it was in front of our Foss house, which is, you have Al Pierce's house, Kennison house, which is our house, and then Foss house. That's where we had the main location.
Can you bring the mic closer?
I'm sorry. The main location for dropping the ice shavings from the Zamboni. The good news about what we presented you today is that was before we had a proper stormwater management plan. This stormwater management plan has a specific location for the ice shavings that is made to accommodate it. And you think about a big pile of ice, it melts very slowly. And so, not being a civil engineer, I can think that there would be no increase to anything in the stormwater management. And to speak to any of Amy's concerns, it would be in a completely different area that's made for where these ice shavings are going to go, along with also, where we put the snow from the parking lot or we put the snow from the rink, right? That all goes to locations that are on the Estabrook Drive side or in front of Foss House. That's well within our property and not abutting any neighbors. So, and I think if you go back to the further things about if we have the property line fence in, if we have a proper property line fence that runs the whole 300 feet or 330 feet, there would be physically no way for that said ice pile to get into anyone else's property. So I think, when we hear, if I had a picture or I had a location where I could speak to it, I think maybe that's not worth doing because you see the plan that we have can adequately accommodate the ice pile and making sure that nothing goes on to any neighboring property.
So to that point, so C202 shows the existing or Zamboni ice dumping area on one of those lots which I think it says Lot 7, Brewster Academy, but those are on Green Street, and that's what I'm talking about. You got the road that goes right through to an existing shed, but you're basically using those 2 lots as setup areas for your whole situation, and that's why I asked about the boundary line thing again. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. It's either is it a boundary line adjustment situation? No? You can, I mean...
I don't know what you're asking. The rink meets setbacks and the Zamboni shed meets setbacks. An ice pile doesn't need to meet setbacks.
Well, I'm seeing a road.
It's a driveway so that the Zamboni isn't driving through or over frozen ground.
So technically, they're not using that property for their operations?
Sure they are. It's all zoned the same. It's the same way you drive across multiple lots on Edgewood. They just have a driveway going from one of their properties to another.
Okay, I'm just trying to put it together with a plan, thinking that it should be condensed on one plan. Roger, do you have any insight on that aspect?
Well, the C-201 plan with the materials we received at the last meeting showed the ice dump area being to the lake side of the Zamboni driveway, and then the Zamboni driveway is on the abutting lot, both of which Brewster owned, I believe.
Yep.
And these are, existing buildings that have been there for quite a while.
Yep.
They may be, one of it may be non-conforming, but they've been there
Yeah, Kenneth
for a lot of years.
Since the early 1800s, and Foss is a little older. It's in the early 1900s, 1906, I believe.
So the back to the infiltration area. So you got the picture of your shows the sloped ground in this picture right here. The slope, and then you have your infiltration trenches that are like right up at the right up next to the boards. It doesn't give you any dimensions. So I'm looking at this picture saying, are your infiltration trenches way back at the end of that slope, or by your plan it looks like they're a lot closer, and it's hard to imagine that your Zamboni ice pile is going to make it all the way to the infiltration trench.
Yeah, I'll let Joanne speak to that.
The Zamboni ice pile will not be it will be infiltrated in the infiltration swale, not in the big 24-inch perforated pipes that abut each side of the rink. So the way it's laid out is there's a 3-foot buffer of grass between the boards, the outside of the boards, and the sidewalk that goes around 3/4 or more than 3/4 of the rink. So that's a paved sidewalk that goes around the outside. And then beyond that are a series of catch basins, and below that is the infiltration trench. So it's all below ground. The big 24-inch pipe, you'll see the little yard drains or catch basins up at the surface, but that's all you'll see of those. And then there are grassed swales, and those are underlined with crushed stone wrapped in fabric, so they're designed to infiltrate some of the runoff that flows through them. If you follow.
I do.
Okay.
I do follow that, yeah. The lay of the land where the pile isn't graded in any shape or form. It's just as existing ground. That's what I'm understanding.
Yeah, it's bumped out a little bit on the Estabrook Road side. You'll see a couple of finished grade contours, but not significantly. I just rounded it off. It's a little bit of fill there to kind of flatten out the top, but not really much. You can see the existing 574 goes closer to the rink. I'm pulling it out a little, and then the 572 below that is roughly where it is now. I'm not sure if that is sufficient explanation.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so you're all set because I need to open it up for the...
I got one more question.
Oh, okay.
Question for Peter, actually.
Go ahead.
Assuming that you receive approval for this today, do you have an anticipated schedule of making the improvements that are described here?
I think as soon as possible, right? So I think the thing we have to just check with the schedule on our site people and see how long it would take them to get there. But certainly we would be doing them as soon as possible, starting with the things that border the properties on Green Street, making sure the fence was going so that we could clearly establish that line, and then after we got the stormwater management, then landscaping would go in afterwards.
Do you anticipate much of this to be completed before practice actually begins?
I think it would probably be ongoing as we start opening the rink. Rink typically opens on the very end of October. So usually we push for a Halloween start date. I mean, last Halloween was like 70 degrees, so it has to be below 50 to be able to make ice. The hope would be, but as I think anybody that's built anything lately knows, time, schedule, getting there. So I think the push would be to get it done, but there may be some things that we would have to get done in the spring, but I think we would just have to look at the construction schedule and make that
one
decision.
of the greatest concerns I have is the foundation for the wall around the chiller.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is very temperature sensitive as far as doing that work.
Yeah, we'd want to get that in the ground ASAP and start to get that built. But yeah, I think we'd be looking at it on multiple fronts. Fencing company for one side, just like we do with our projects, you have multiple different subs in for doing all work at the same time.
So last year was a tough year for you. You had a lot of rain, a lot of warm days.
Yep.
How many days do you think you got last year on the ice?
It was a lot of rain last year, so we dealt with that, and I think that's a good testament to how there was no real stormwater management issues with all that rain, and now we're going to make it even better. I'd say for as total days out of 4 months, I'd say maybe we had half the time during those 4 months, maybe 2/3 of the time. I'd have to get an exact for you, but I don't know that they kept track.
So this is where I'm going. So in the future, will there ever be a cover over the top of the ice rink?
I think we're not here to talk about that now or to try and ask for that now. It's a very expensive undertaking. I think we've had a lot of people ask, hey, can you just put a roof on it? But I mean, if anybody's ever put a roof on a 200 by 85 foot structure, it's a very expensive undertaking, and we would need to really look into that in the future. But that's not in our current plans.
That's just relative to stormwater that would run off the roof. That's where that comes from.
Yeah, and we had talks about that at one point when we were looking at different types of stormwater management things, and the idea would be that the roof would capture the same amount. But again, we're not at that point or talking about that.
Okay.
Kathy, do you think that we hit? We tried to hit every question that you asked, but I want to make sure if you have check marks next to all of your things.
Yes, you did.
All right.
Thank
you all
you.
for the time today. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, I'll open the public hearing now. If any member of the public wants to speak to this issue, why don't you come on up, give us your thoughts. And as Doug mentioned earlier, we did receive several letters and have taken those into account. So, but go ahead.
I'm Amy Hines, and I live at 22 Green Street.
Can you bring it down a little bit more? Okay, great.
And I'm representing one of my neighbors who isn't here tonight, and he wrote this letter, and I'd like to read it, if I could. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It says, "Good evening, and thank you for your opportunity to speak as a Green Street resident and to bring to light a number of reasons for our concern as neighbors to Brewster. First, a little history. On a June day in 2022, Brewster's Miss Harrington came to my door to announce that Brewster was going to build a hockey rink on the field behind my house. This field has, for our 55 years, in our house, offered us pleasure and appreciation of a grassy green outlook toward the campus and earlier toward the lake. Now, a year later, that's gone, replaced by an Olympic-sized structure of boards, multiple ice-making machines, stadium-sized lights, 2 grandstands and a ditch, and the 12-foot strip of remaining land between the rink and my property line. At the time of our visit, I asked questions of Ms. Harrington. What hours would they operate? Answers, afternoons to 8 p.m. This time schedule was observed. Would there be competitive games with visiting schools? Answer, no. Those games would be played at Abenaki facility. What about lighting? There would be downward lights. Not so. A nearby light shone directly at my house and into my windows and my barn apartment, disturbing my tenant. And finally, when asked how long they would operate into the season, Ms. Harrington said they would dismantle the rink in the summer season. Obviously, this last has not happened. My family, as well as our neighbors across the street, are deeply concerned that the intrusion of this rink will or already has impeded the natural flow of groundwater as it makes its way over our properties and into the field down toward the lake. Can Brewster prove to us that this will not happen? Further, can Brewster show us that in this new permanent plan that they will not build a structure any higher than that what presently exists? In other words, do they anticipate a building, roof, or other cover beyond the present structure? What kind of speaker system do they anticipate? Would they build grandstands or viewer seating? More such questions will undoubtedly arise in time. Unhappily, because we are the sole independent property remaining on the west side of Green Street, we find it necessary to defend ourselves against the steady intrusion of Brewster on the residential character of our town. We will continue to join our good neighbors in this ongoing confliction atmosphere to protect and preserve our neighborhood. This is from Alan Pierce.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for hearing me.
Okay, all right. And I believe one of you said that you had talked to Alan Pierce. Is that right, or?
Yeah, so I spoke to Al Pierce as we were applying for variances for the September 2022 site plan meeting. I have tried to make connection with Al leading up to the August 15th meeting. In this meeting, I've left a couple of messages and knocked on his door and have been unsuccessful in connecting with him directly.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, and any other member of the public?
Yeah.
So my basic
Excuse me,
belief...
could you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, sure. Peter Batchelder, 10 Green Street. So my belief is that this location is the worst location you can absolutely put an ice rink right behind Al Pierce's house, who just commented, Amy commented. This is the worst placement you can put an ice rink with everything they got at Brewster, all the resources. Whoever decided to do this, group of people at Brewster, to stick it right there, and now decide to stick it to us right behind, permanently right behind Al Pierce's house. I don't care what they do, the fence, the sound, it's all nice. They should do that. The lighting, the landscaping, they should do that. That's what they should do when they put a big structure like this on their campus. But to stick this thing right behind Green Street and stick it to all us residents with all the noise, with all the junk that we just experienced last year, we said, you know what? We don't hate Brewster. We don't hate them. We'll put up with this temporary ice rink. We'll put up with it. But now, 1 year later, they're coming to you guys to say, we want it permanent in the worst location possible. Horrible location. I guarantee you that there should be something related to Al Pierce's property value, because this thing, as was stated, is a huge structure. And to stick that thing right behind his house, a 92-year-old man, and to stick it right there, it actually goes beyond what you would think Brewster would want to do to the village rural character of Wolfeboro. There's only so much property left in Wolfeboro that is the village rural character. And on Green Street, we try to maintain our houses as best we can. And we try to be a good partner with Brewster. And we try to, and I'll tell you, we never win. We never win, ever. We've never won. The only time we won is when they put those 2 dorms on Green Street, and we balked at that, and then they grandfathered them within a month. So they put those dorms there. Now they got the Zamboni right there. Now they got the Zamboni driving right across, right in the backyard of Al's house with a big, huge dirt pile. So I would also challenge this board that those setbacks are all messed up. Now, if it's true that 40 feet, if 40 feet is the setback, then the actual, where the players sit, that's another 7 feet. So now we're at 33 feet. I would say they already violated it. And depending on where they put that concrete to secure this structure, however they do this concrete, I don't know how they're going to do this concrete. I don't know how they're going to secure it. I don't have any plans. I don't need to see the plans. But they have infringed into Al's property, into the Dow's property, tremendously. They know they don't care about their own 2 properties. They don't care about those. They're incorporated into the master law. We know that. At one point, they wanted to put a science center right there. Okay, they can do whatever they want with those properties. But they can't infringe that close to the village rural character of the Green Street, which solidifies what the character of Wolfeboro is all about. And they're just going to destroy it. They have no mercy on it. And I would say to Brewster, they should move that thing. They should move that thing. I'm not saying they move it out of the spot that it's in, meaning that location. Just move it over 50 feet, 100 feet. Get over into that water easement that they're talking about. The Smith Center had a water easement. They went around that. They can do it. They can do it. They need to do it. Having this thing where it's at is gross. It's a violation. And I would think Brewster would care. They would care that they're just going to wreck that street. They're just going to wreck Al's house. They're just going to wreck it. Who cares? It's money. It's money. And we didn't even put enough money in it to fix it, so we're not going to fix it. It was temporary. Now it's permanent, in your face. And we're mad. We're mad because it's so ridiculous. If it was like, I don't know, another 50 feet over, we'd say, you know, they really got us on that one. They got us on that one because they really did it. They did it right. They put in perfect lighting. They put in perfect fences. They put in perfect landscape. They didn't drive that Zamboni right behind Al Pierce's house. They took in consideration everything. Jeez, man, they got us. They did a good job. I got to admit, they did a good job. If they did that, but they didn't. They didn't, and they won't. They won't. They have to be forced to do it. They will not do it unless you make them do it through whatever means you have. You've got to fight them. There's not much property left in Wolfeboro. There's not much village character left. It's a fantastic place to live, and I don't want them wrecking it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dennis Shower from 209 South Main, also top size bed and breakfast. Not sure I can top that, Peter. First of all, I want to thank all of you for giving us a chance to for you to take a deeper dive into what we're really kind of batting around here. I think the genesis of this whole situation was, and Peter touched on this, and everyone, I think Amy did too, was at the beginning we were really told that this was a temporary structure. And I suppose that we're innocent enough to think that maybe they would just put up an edge on it and flood it and put a couple of hoops at the end of, or whatever they call them, at the end of each of the rink, and kids would go bang around with the hockey sticks, and it'd be all going away in the summer. Now, I don't know how they approached you all, and maybe you could give me some feedback, or us some feedback, on whether they really came in as a temporary permit. Was there ever any talk about it going permanent? Because after this started, it was very evident that this was much more than just a little backyard rink that was going in. There was a lot of money going in it. And I suppose if they really felt that they were so confident that they would get a permanent approval after a year or two, that they went ahead and spent that money, you know, I would say that's shame on them. Now, I don't know that that's the case, but if it is, it's potentially water under the bridge, or maybe money under the bridge. I think it's incumbent on really all of you, and maybe everyone in this community, to hope that honesty will prevail when someone comes before you and says they're going to do something, that's what happens. I don't think that's what happened in this case. And that's really where I think the problem is, and I sympathize with them in a lot of ways, because they put a lot of time and effort soliciting money to put this together. And I know they have a wonderful athletic department all the way around. And I know hockey's very popular, and I think it's a wonderful thing. It just really is in the wrong spot. If it was to be put there, in my opinion, there are two choices. One, the plug ought to be pulled completely, put somewhere else, or a full facility ought to be put up that would do away with all of the issues that we've got in front of us, the sound, the noise, the light, etc. All that would be gone. So I suppose in some ways tonight the rubber hits the road in one way or another. Hopefully you'll give strong consideration to what the issues are here. I know that they've done a lot. They mean well, but really there are options. Peter's alluded to this, and I'm not sure that 50 feet or even 100 feet is going to really solve the problem personally. I think you either knock it off totally there, find another spot. And honestly, one of the things that really hit me wrong was the comment that we couldn't put it down by the tennis courts because we can't lose the tennis courts. But really, that hit me wrong, because it's sort of like we really don't worry about the folks on Green Street. We're much more concerned about the tennis courts. And that just didn't sit well with me. And hopefully not with you either. I wish them well. I really do. I think they're wonderful for a town, but I think they've made a really colossal error and some major presumptions that might have been wrong in this situation, and I hope you take a strong look at this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Just to reiterate, we hear the impassioned words of our neighbors, and we are doing everything within our capacity to respond to your concerns and your quality of living experience. I understand where you're coming from, and we hear you. I wanted to bring up the September 20th decision regarding the temporary nature of the approval. And I'm just going to read it word for word. It's the Planning Board decision point number 5. The temporary installation is approved for 1 season, October 22 through March 2023, or until full site plan approval is granted. So there was not a scenario where we were pitching this as one and done, we only want this for 1 season. We had a very tight timeline by which we needed to get the rink up and running last year. The full site plan review did not go through the normal process. We fully intended to come back at this time. We actually wanted to come in the spring, which is why the rink hasn't been dismantled yet, because we've been waiting for engineers and contractors to design the full site plan review around stormwater management. So I just want to correct the record that we didn't pitch this fully as a 1-season rink. And I feel terribly that that was the perception by the neighbors. But as noted by the planning board, you did approve this for 1 season or until full site plan review. So, is there one other point? Oh, yeah, and also to the setbacks on the Green Street side, ordinance, I believe, is 20 feet. 10. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask Tavis to speak to that issue. Do they meet the setbacks, Tavis?
It's my understanding that they represented compliant setbacks, yes, which is 10 feet in the side and rear, which
Okay,
is
thank
not
you.
extreme by any measure.
Okay. Hey, yep, why not, come on up. Yep.
Just a very short point to what Susan just said, which is that might have been their intent all along, that this be permanent. When we received the notices last year, it said temporary approval, or temporary permit. So it was noticed wrong then. So there could be a legal concern. I don't know. But that's what we got last year, or I would have been here. I think every one of us would have been here if we knew that that was permanent.
It wasn't. It was approved from October to March or until further site
The
plan.
notice that we got last year was for a temporary ice rink.
Right,
period.
which is what was approved.
Okay, thank you.
Can I?
Okay.
So, listening to the gentleman over here and listen to the officer representing to Brewster Academy, if you go back to the August 20th minutes, and on page 5, midway down, it says, Peter Gilligan addressed noise questions, stating that, yes, it is 65 decibels. They would be going back to Abenaki once it is back online, and the mat would be removed from the temporary housing for the Zamboni. He then confirmed this request is for 1 season. Susan Harrington stated that once Abenaki is up online, that this is what will be this is what we will be using. Kathy Barnard asked if this building will be totally removed at the end of the season. Peter Gilligan stated yes, that it would be taken down and removed and stored. And on the back page, on number 6, after number 5, it says the underlying impervious rubber mat will be installed after the ground is frozen and removed upon the spring thaw. So read into it what you may. I think there's 2 different things that are going on here. I think they did state that it was going to be for 1 season, but the conditions say until full site plan is granted.
Okay, any other member of the public? Oh, okay. Okay, so go ahead and close the public hearing. Board members?
My recollection on the topic of temporary and site plan review was because a number of questions came up at the time about not having all the information for a real technical site plan review. Not that we would grant necessarily, approval of any site plan that came in. What we were granting was temporary approval. If if permanent approval tonight, let's say, was sought, you would have to come forward with a site plan. But it's a new concept. It's not as if we said, you bring in site plan and we'll approve it. We approved a temporary.
Yes, the point of the condition, just remember they can't talk anymore unless you reopen
Sorry,
it. But
what I
the
was
point
talking to them.
was it wasn't certain when Brewster may or may not return for full site plan. That's why it's worded that way. It wasn't meant to be a shady condition. So what happened toward the end of the October to March timeframe, and Peter can't speak, but he can start nodding, he started getting emails from me. When's it coming down? What's your plan? How's it going to proceed? So an enforcement process began, and then it was an interchange between the code officer and I and Brewster about how much could be removed. It was then confirmed that there was no rubber membrane on the ground. So it was pervious all summer long, even though the superstructure, if you will, I don't mean size, but the boards and pieces of the rink were functionally pervious throughout the summer. And as we got closer and closer, Kathy started emailing me, so I started emailing Peter. Eventually, an engineer was engaged, and they finally came in for so. So to that end, I think everyone can agree that once the ice melted within the time frame allowed by the planning board, the rink was not used. So.
Thank you. Roger, did you?
When we sit on an application, our job is to determine whether it complies with the zoning ordinance and the other applicable regulations. We can't say, well, you know, if it were my house, I'd like it moved, or I think our job is, does it meet the current applicable regulations? And in this case, I believe that it meets the setback requirements, it meets the permitted use requirements. I think as part of site review, the issues that were raised by abutters, we can consider. I think that Brewster has tried to address those. I certainly expect that they will follow through on those. And I don't think we have any power or authority to move this. I think that it meets the regulations. I think that the abutters have been listened to by the board. I think they've been listened to by Brewster. And I think it meets the requirements.
Anybody else?
So I would say in contrast a little bit to Roger's comments with regard to meeting the regulations, there are some prior cases that I was looking at earlier today, contentious decisions within New Hampshire, and one of the comments was that site plan review cannot be reduced to the mechanical process of determining conformity with specific zoning and site plan regulations. It should include consideration of abutters and impact on abutter property values. And I'm not suggesting in this case that we are or are not taking those things into consideration. I'm just saying it's more nuanced than specifically looking at the mechanical regulations.
Just as a helpful pointer, if the board wants to go down that avenue, I would suggest you request more information as opposed to a qualitative determination by a board member as to whether you believe property values are or are not.
That's correct. And as I said, there's other things to be concerned with, and I'm not suggesting that property values will or will not be affected by this. It's just something that we need to consider. We don't have evidence one way or the other at the moment.
Well, and another talking point for a later date perhaps, but it's relevant here to a degree. The noise ordinance really doesn't address an outdoor recreational facility as part of a campus. The zoning regulations in the village residential with the campus overlay that this has basically opens that potential Pandora's box. I believe you will also receive some public comment later on another case on the agenda about the relative noise of pickleball. That has come up. I'm not talking about that case, don't get squirrely, but it has come up about, well, if the pickleball courts were expanded down at Foss Field, how was that noise going to impact the neighbors, et cetera? The noise ordinance really speaks to weed whackers, construction noise, things of that nature. And it's honestly an ongoing controversy between the police department and my department as to who gets what noise complaint and how is it addressed. So it's a very sensitive issue, but I do think the board touched on it at the last meeting that the nuisance word comes up when noise comes up. Nuisance suits are usually defined by or decided by a judge. So you may not want to determine that there was or was not a nuisance. Certainly, suggestion of a potential nuisance. One other thing I need to point out to the board is that the applicant has suggested an 8-foot fence within 1 foot of the property line. That is something that might need a variance.
They could put 6 up, though.
They could put up 6. I don't know if there's something magic of where the 8-foot came from, or if that was relative to halfway up the glass, or
Probably has to do with residential scale.
it could be something the board might want to ask. I mean, if you think about 98% of the pucks are going to be within 6 feet, and noise goes horizontally. So a 6-foot fence might be a fair compromise if the board was interested in that. The other thing to point out is and the question was raised, I think the board needs to make some sort of a determination as to whether or not the sound block that is illustrated in the packet, I guess what the board meant when it said concrete block and the prohibited elements in the architectural design standards.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Tavis?
The architectural design standards say not concrete block. It's a prohibited element. I can attest to the noise canceling ability of that sound wall, but the fact that it's a block face is something the board would need to determine. You know, did we mean we don't want brand new commercial buildings built out of concrete block, or do we want no concrete block anywhere? Something to consider. There were neighbor comments about village character, et cetera. I'm just trying to throw everything out there for the board.
Yeah, I
to
appreciate
consider.
that, and that's why earlier I had asked about the outside finish of it.
Correct.
I have another question, and that is, if this work will not be done before this rink goes into use, can we actually let them use it?
Right. Good question. But unfortunately, that would go to Tavis.
What's that?
So
Well,
usually
if
when we
all
have...
of these things that they've said that they're going to do, they need to be done before we can give them a certificate of compliance.
All depends on how the board applies the condition. So if hypothetically the board wanted to make a condition of approval, all things listed in the 16-page submission prior to operation of the rink, that's how you would word the condition. You said, we understand the landscaping may not occur until spring of '24, or applicant shall demonstrate continued effort to install noise canceling, and it's really your call.
Okay, I don't know. What?
So the block,
Okay.
the block picture shows the foam on the outside, inside. You know what that means? The outside of the concrete block facing the outside air, the foam is just on the inside of that. Question is, can you face that concrete block with an architectural clapboard or something that meets the architectural design guidelines?
John, it's my understanding that if you want to call it the textured surface of the block, with the angled faces is meant to face the chiller to redirect the sound waves, and the smooth surface of the block would be facing outside away from the chiller.
Okay.
So that would be a smooth wall on the outside then, right?
Okay.
Smooth block?
So in theory at least, the sound waves would be absorbed by the cavities inside the block, which is where that rock wool or whatever it is placed to deaden the sound. So the
Okay, so
exterior
it's-
surface will be flat, and then it could be finished with stucco or cladding or whatever gets chosen.
Whatever architectural design guidelines that we have. So that's actually a better scenario because the outside is flush. So, yes.
So just for the board, under the design standards, under materials, traditional building materials such as granite, brick, wood, and fieldstone are preferred. C, exposed block, ceramic roof tiles, corrugated steel are prohibited. I'm skipping over the irrelevant words.
But to be clear, it says exposed block. Is that right?
Exposed block, correct.
So the block could be covered with something so that it would no longer be exposed block.
Correct.
Yes.
Where I was suggesting is if, for me personally, there's a fine line between brick and exposed block.
Well, it's not brick.
Correct. No, but to that end, it could be painted brick.
I think they've agreed, or they've been nodding their heads and said they can accommodate the situation.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that would be both the fence and the surround. The fence
Can
is
I-
block, right? Yeah.
The fence
Can I
is block,
split
concrete
the
block?
hair?
also? No.
I want to
What is
split the
the
hair
fence
on
made
the
of? Cedar.
cedar. Cement block, if you paint it, is it still exposed?
That's why I raise
Yes.
it.
Yeah, it should have some kind of screening or cover on top of it.
Could you talk into the mic?
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
So
it should be
let's see where it
screened or
goes.
covered, basically, if we're going to look at it.
Okay, someone want to make a motion?
I have one more question, please.
Okay.
The letter asked about the bleachers, and the bleachers aren't on the plan, so
There are no bleachers, is what they told us.
The only
Can I-
approval could only extend to what's on the plan. So no speakers, no fences, no seats, balconies, whatever.
just wanted to get that out there for the record so everybody understood it was answered.
Can I ask a follow-up question for that? If the rink is approved, would they have to come back to us for bleachers? And
Yes. If it's
So-
not on the plan you have, it has to come back.
I'm just wondering, I know it's not in your,
Like-
on your budget radar, but what if a parent comes to you and says, we'd like to foot the bill for bleachers?
No,
Would
we-
you,
Well,
would you turn them
They would
down?
need to come back here.
They'd have to come back.
They would need to come back here.
Okay, but I'm just asking, I know it's not
Yeah.
in their budget, but it is not uncommon on private school property for parents to come up with the money.
So, Jane, two issues. One is, since public session is closed, they can't respond directly.
Yeah.
And
Oh, okay.
secondly, as Tavis had mentioned, anything that's not on the plan would need to come before the planning board for approval.
Okay, someone want to make a motion?
We never got to it at the last meeting. I did have 4 suggested conditions. They're the 4 standard conditions. You have them in your review. I don't see a need to read them into the record. What I would add, what I would suggest is the 5th condition referring to those criteria outlined in the 16 sheets submitted at the 9/5 meeting. If the board wants to have conditions.
So I would suggest, in addition to Tavis's recommendation, that we should also consider that what I would think are the major concerns of the abutters, which would be light and noise, should be addressed prior to, or substantially addressed prior to operations this winter. Certainly, I'd like to see shielding put on the lights to keep the lights from spilling out, and some way to manage the noise from the chillers. I don't know if there's time to build the acoustic block wall, but perhaps, I'm not sure how to configure that restriction.
Okay, well, if somebody would make a motion, that would be helpful.
Before I see you warming up, I would also suggest that the plan be revised to show a 6-foot wall and the
Yeah, right.
applicant submit an exterior block
Well, if we
finish.
have a motion, we can then start putting conditions on, but,
Well, I know, I think Tavis is suggesting to include the
Yeah,
conditions
right.
in the motion.
right.
And
Well,
findings
well,
of fact wouldn't hurt.
Once
Yeah.
we have the motion, then we can add conditions, is what I'm saying.
What is the security going to cover? Is that going to cover the driveway, with drainage, landscaping, the fence,
And noise, storm drainage.
and the chiller enclosure?
I didn't understand the question.
Well, it's going to, in your review, it addresses security, but it doesn't say what it's going to be security for.
I'm going to let the board decide. Most of the stormwater is already there. So you could do security for,
Well, if it's
Lands-
mostly there, I'd
landscape.
like security for whatever is left. I think there should be security for the fence. There should be security for the chiller enclosure and for the landscaping.
Okay, well, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. I'll make a motion to approve this. Somebody going to second it? And with conditions, and then we can go through the conditions.
Second it.
Motion has been made and seconded by Roger.
I think we should go through the conditions before.
Well, but wait a minute, it's then going to be Roger, Doug, myself, Jane, Brad, and Julie who will be voting on this.
Yes. Right.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. Let's see. Okay, conditions, with conditions. No roof can be put on this. All of the items listed in the document that starts with Brewster strives to always be a good neighbor. All of those conditions need to be added because that's what they said they were going to do. The architectural design issue needs to be addressed. The Zamboni, I think that Zamboni needs to be placed right on the subject property, not on another abutting property or anyplace else. It should be on the property and left there so that it's not bothering people. Let's see, the setbacks are addressed. The height, that would be addressed if the applicant comes back to the planning board again. The banging of the pucks will be addressed before any certificate or temporary certificate of compliance is issued. There will be no PA system or music. The Saturday events have been described in this document that doesn't have a title, but it says Brewster strives to always be a good neighbor. It's 2 pages. The stormwater runoff, that seems to have been addressed to people's satisfaction. And the landscaping with the fencing, the planting probably can wait until next spring, but I think the fencing needs to go up. How am I doing?
One issue, Kathy, is I don't believe that they have plans to address the banging of the pucks with regard to making any modifications to the structure. That was only going to be addressed, I believe, by limiting the hours of operation.
And the fence.
And, yeah,
Sorry?
And the fence.
it'll be
Yeah,
addressed as
okay.
part of the overall
Okay, so
noise.
the banging of the pucks will be addressed by the fencing? Anyone else have any other?
Yeah, lastly, you'd made reference now to the 2-page document that starts, Brewster strives always to be a good neighbor. As part of that document, they have listed 4 days for their advanced schedule for the 4 Winter Classic game days for this winter. I would suggest we amend that to say that the 4 Winter Classic game days will be submitted to and approved by I'm not sure who in the town is appropriate to do that, but we don't expect it to be the specific days listed in this document.
If it's helpful, I didn't hear the board too concerned about Wednesday versus Saturday or Friday, as long as it was daytime. But I think the number of events is the relevant part.
Yeah, so Tavis, I agree with you that we perhaps can limit the game days to 4 per year, or 4 per season, I should say, rather. 4 per season, and not list the specific dates. However, the schedule will be published to the public, so they'll have advance notice.
And it will be during the daytime hours.
And it will be during daytime hours, that's correct.
Okay, any other, go ahead, Brad.
Did you include any, the stormwater management in your conditions there? I didn't.
Yes, that they must comply with the
Okay, because it
stormwater.
wasn't in the letter here that you were referencing, that's all.
Okay,
So.
all right, yes, I thought that I did.
It
but-
might be helpful to reference all 16 of the sheets as received 9/5, as opposed to trying to separate out each of the
Yeah,
elements.
so Brad, the stormwater was in that 16-page package.
right.
I believe at least the one I received, it was at the end of it.
And for clarification, the sound dampening around the refrigeration units and the fence have to be up prior to operation this season?
Yes, please.
I'm just asking if that was the suggested condition.
I believe it was.
Yeah.
I do as well.
Well,
So,
since there's a motion and a second, I want to make sure at least the first and the second agree with before people vote on
And
it.
Tavis, it was a little bit rambling the way we went through all these conditions. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure you've captured it.
Okay.
Right. Did you?
That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
So Kathy, how are they going to keep the Zamboni on the subject property if the plan doesn't say that?
Well, that's a good question, but
I
that's
don't know
up
if
to
you have
them
a
to figure
I
it
don't know
out.
if you have a regulation to stand on to say that.
I mean, the Zamboni building is located on Brewster, a lot owned by Brewster, and what will become the paved road to it is on Brewster's property. Happen to be separate lots of record, but they're all owned by Brewster.
And, I mean, John is just going to drive over there. It wouldn't be any different if they parked at some other garage on their property. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, looking at this plan, there doesn't, at least to my eye, appear to be sufficient room on the lot where the rink is located to also locate the Zamboni shed. I don't see a practical way to keep it anywhere other than the lot that it's currently on.
Well, I think there's a fair amount of property on the other
Yeah,
side.
right, I think so, too.
Yes, it would fit easily on the other side, but the way they faced it,
Okay.
it's going the other direction.
How about if I just change the condition to the Zamboni must be on the property with the rink, and they need to show that the code officer where it will be?
I'm not in favor of that condition. I don't see
Okay.
why it can't be where it's shown on the plan. I mean, you've got 2 Brewster buildings on either side of it, and, I mean,
I get where the board's going. I'm concerned because you're potentially considering a condition that isn't really supported by regulation or public testimony. And it's something that everybody does, including board members. So I don't.
Well, I was speaking to Al Pierce's concern about the...
Although I would tend to agree with Roger, leaving the Zamboni on the lot that it's currently located.
I think you should be more worried about where the Zamboni dumps rather than where he parks for the night.
And that's been addressed during
Yeah,
the
right.
stormwater discussion.
Right, but I mean, if you're worried about the two, I mean, just because he drove home over there is really no big deal, but the fact that he dumped over there might be.
but they're dumping it to the left of the roadway behind a Brewster. Right?
Okay, so...
No, they're dumping it down below, there.
Right there.
Now, are you trying to point out where it could be?
No.
No,
Well,
they've
where the
got the
dump
snow dump
area
on
is.
one side and the ice dump on the other. I mean, not to be inappropriately sarcastic or candid, but where you put your snow in the winter in New Hampshire is a challenge for all. I don't know if there's anything preventing somebody from dumping ice on their yard.
Okay, so I will remove my condition about the
catch that?
Zamboni. It's probably in the, possibly the best condition.
Kathy's saying she would remove her condition of the Zamboni.
I understand. I think it would be helpful to, it seemed to be a mix of findings and
Yeah.
conditions.
Right, right, okay.
So
All right.
it's all read into the record and we'll sort that out.
Okay. Any other conditions? Okay, call the question. Let me do a roll call. Roger?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes?
Jane?
No.
Okay, Brad?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll vote yes. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. I appreciate all the input from the applicant and the neighbors. And I think we'll probably see a lawsuit from this. All right. Okay, all right, let's see. Jane, can you sit in Peter Goodwin's place since he's not here as the alternate?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, next item, O'Hare Enterprise, 33 Tips Cove Road, tax map and lot 240001, case 2023-15. This is a special use permit for construction in wetlands buffer setback for a pickleball court. And
So while Mr. Rhines is getting ready, I need the board to be very understanding of what this is. This is not a pickleball in a wetland or the wetland buffer.
I was just reading what was here.
No, I understand.
Okay.
The special use permit is triggered because there's development within the wetlands setback, but those setbacks are typically reserved for building setbacks. So what's being discussed tonight is not something that would require a building permit. This is functionally patio area in the setback.
Okay, hi.
Good evening. Okay. For the record, I'm Jim Rhines from Horizons Engineering, representing O'Hare Enterprises LLC in their request for a special use permit to create a dual-purpose basketball court and pickleball court on their property that would impact 22 square feet in the wetlands setback, but it would be fully compliant with the wetlands buffer. The property is fully developed. There is an existing tennis court here and an existing basketball court here. And what they'd like to do is add 6 feet on each side of this existing basketball court. They own the abutting property and looked at doing something there, but everything there was all natural, mature trees and stuff, and they would have to regrade, cut down, a bunch of mature trees and stuff. And so they looked at this and felt that adding this in an area that was already developed was probably the least impacting alternative for the property that they own. The impact is right here, and as I said, it's 22 square feet. Before I go through the criteria, if
Yes.
anybody has any questions,
I just have one, Jim. Is it surface play there, or is it just pathway that the 22 square feet is? Is it part of the court itself?
It would be, yeah. So the court right now is sloped from here to here. So it all slopes this way. It doesn't slope toward either wetland. And so it would simply be widening both sides. We are proposing an infiltration trench on this entire side where there is none presently.
Jim, is
Yes.
the 22 square feet based on what they want to do or based on surveying the wetland?
We surveyed the wetlands, so it's both. I mean, we as-built, the courts, and we physically located the wetlands, so we know where the boundaries of the wetlands are, and we know where the limits of the existing tennis court is. So, by calculating that difference.
So the question that I'm thinking about is, if that line was 3 inches or 6 inches one side of where you delineated the wetland, they probably wouldn't be here. So you're confident that that delineation is exactly where?
Well, I mean, we located the flags, so natural features, land surveyors are obligated to locate them within plus or minus a foot. Wetland scientists are supposed to, locate their flags within plus or minus, I think, 3 feet. So within those tolerances, but I can tell you the points that we located on the tennis court and how accurately we located the flags, that the 22 square feet we're asking for is the best we can do, understanding those limitations.
Yeah, I'm actually sympathetic of the applicant because of that fact that there is plus or minus a foot when people are out there. So to the public, they're coming for 22 square feet. They're doing us justice.
Jim, why don't you go through the C1, A, B, and C?
Sure. So in order to be granted a permit under this, we have to demonstrate that we've satisfied 175-10C1A, which is lack of alternatives. And as I said, there is no reasonable location outside of the wetland or wetland buffer zone that has a less detrimental impact to the wetland. Due to the location of the wetlands on the site and the existing development, there was no way to expand the basketball court into a dual-purpose pickleball court while keeping the basketball hoop centered upon the expanded court without impacts to the wetland structure setback. As I mentioned, the applicant had considered constructing the entire new pickleball court on the abutting property that they own, but that would have resulted in 2,323 square feet of new impervious impact and significant earth disturbance, removal of vegetation in presently undisturbed areas to construct the court. Whereas,
Is that abutting property developed?
yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's the original Shanghai Shek estate, and
Yeah.
so it's all developed.
Yeah, okay, but, all right.
So 175-10C1B, essential need. So this requires proposed construction to be essential to the productive use of other land not in the wetland conservation overlay district and buffer zone. And since the area outside of the structure setback can be used for recreational purposes, which are essential to the lifestyle of the applicants, and the expansion of the basketball court will allow them to maintain those recreational activities without jeopardizing the quality of the wetland. And 175-10C1C, impact minimization. And we have to demonstrate that the design and construction and maintenance will be such that to minimize a detrimental impact to the wetlands, and will include restoration of the site as nearly as possible to the original grade, And the proposal is to minimize the site by constructing the expansion in a previously disturbed area. At the onset of the project, the applicant looked at the other areas, as I've mentioned, thus we believe that the expansion is deemed as the least impacting alternative and the most environmentally sound option. In addition to those, in accordance with 175-5A through G, we have to demonstrate that we've satisfied that.
Okay, and we probably already, have we all read this? Or do you want him to go through it?
I'll go through it, or if I've submitted it, whatever the board's pleasure.
Right.
He doesn't need to go through it for my benefit.
Okay. All right, John?
I'm all set, too.
Yeah, okay. All right, and Conservation Commission also took a look at this, and they said the project as proposed will have less impact than if new courts were to be constructed in the upland area. And there'd be a small amount of additional runoff, and that could be offset by planting new native shrubs along the border of the court or at the edge of the jurisdictional wetland. Would this be part of this plan?
Yes, anything that's disturbed, as they're done, they will replant that with native vegetation, and we have put that on the plans.
Okay.
Is this the 2021 plan, or is it a revision to the 2021 plan?
This is the 2021 plan. We had as-built the structure and the driveway and stuff, and then we had Greg Howard delineate the wetlands. It was redelineated in 2018.
Should that be noted as a revision on the plan?
Well, this plan, Roger, is the first special use permit plan, so that's why we didn't put a revision block. I think the certification. We could, if the board wanted, we could put a note that about the as-built and the date of the field work. But since this is a new plan, typically when we create a new plan, we don't put a revision block on it. We date it for the first time that we've done it. If the plans that we submitted had been shoreland, and we did do a special use permit for the walkway down to the docks.
But it seemed, well, I guess one of the things you do have to note the plan purpose, but otherwise I thought it was difficult to tell what this was actually showing. And that it appeared that there had been one plan without the 22-foot wetland setback encroachment, and then there's this plan with it.
Oh, so yeah, I mean that was the intent of the plan purpose note. But if there's something that we can do to make it clearer to the board in the future, we'd be happy to do that.
It's not a big deal, but it just.
So my question is why can't we put it all 12 feet one way and avoid it completely?
So we discussed that, but you may know Nolan is a big basketball player, and it was critical to him that the basketball be centered. And so, because I pointed out that you could put it all on one side, and he really felt that was untenable from a basketball standpoint.
So they could move the hoop.
I mentioned that as well, but then he was concerned that it wasn't centered on the tennis court. So I'm telling you that we had all of the conversations you have raised.
Been there, talked that.
Did you have a conversation about putting the pickleball court on the tennis court the way they do at Foss Field?
Yeah, I did have that conversation.
Was that too many lines?
I was trying to avoid coming here.
Well, something else for the board to remember is this, call it pickleball, call it tennis, call it what you want. It's not a structure, so it's really not
why isn't it a structure?
The game?
By definition, this, if someone wanted to put a patio in the same spot, we'd not be having this discussion.
Well, structure is defined as something that was built or constructed with fixed location on the ground. And this certainly sounds like something constructed with a fixed location on the ground, which makes it a structure.
Yep, that's a direction that could be taken.
So there's concrete footings for certain aspects of the court?
I don't believe there's concrete footings, as I don't believe there's concrete footings.
For the same reason the driveway isn't considered a structure.
Is this just an asphalt court?
It's actually,
Is it
it's
more like a tennis
not
court?
asphalt, it's his tennis court is some
That special plasticky
high-tech
stuff?
thing, yeah, some polymer or something.
So the question of vegetation, so you said you would plant whatever vegetation that's natural to the area, but in your inventory, you have gray birch, hemlock, maple, red pine, and white pine. So what would you suggest that you would be planting?
It would probably be shrubs like blueberries, high bush blueberries, things like that. They wouldn't be putting trees back. It would be shrubs.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other concerns? Okay, someone want to make a motion?
Or you want to have public comment?
Yes. Sorry, but there's no.
Give me one motion to open and close the public hearing.
Right. Okay, so I'll open for a public hearing and close it. Okay.
Make a motion, we approve case number 2023-15, special use permit for construction wetland buffer setback for pickleball court, 33 Tips Cove Road, tax map number lot 240-001.
Okay,
A second.
Okay, and for the findings of fact, there apparently are no impacts on the neighbors. The special permit in the application really explains the findings. Conservation Commission has made some suggestions, and those suggestions will be implemented with the planting of native shrubs. And that's pretty much it. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
I think Tavis has some conditions.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I have on
Yes, right.
the conditions, I think we should go back to citing the plan as being approved the way it was done in the past, so that somebody doesn't have to look through files to find out when something was stamped as coming in. You just look at the plan, it has the date, and you know that you have the approved plan. I would also delete the third suggested condition, because you're approving what was submitted on the plan, and if it's changed, then presumably you need to come back in, and this is sort of like somebody emptied a wastebasket in your lap.
I don't know if that's a change to the conditions of this one, but
Well, I think what Roger's suggesting is just remove the third condition you'd suggested.
Yeah.
that's fine. The only one that's relevant really is number 2.
Well, number one's kind of relevant.
Well, as you just said, what's turned in is what's being approved, so that goes without saying.
Well, I think it should be the plan dated August.
Couldn't that just be added?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
But I think, that is what we used to do, and I think it's a good procedure, particularly not, in this case, we got one plan, but, we went through hunters with a whole series of plans, and it could be a challenge to find out what was approved and not approved.
Okay, so we've got 2 conditions.
John, would you modify your motion to include the
Right.
conditions as mentioned by Roger?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm all set with it, and sorry I missed that boat. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed. I don't think it meets criteria A.
That it doesn't, I'm sorry, Vaughn.
No alternative location outside the
Yeah.
wetland setback is less detrimental, is feasible.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, so we're pretty much all set.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have a third item on the agenda.
You have a third item on the agenda, no applicant, so it's up to the board.
What?
The applicant's not here.
Yeah, right.
And the application is totally incomplete, so we couldn't act on it anyway. There's no plan that shows what we're being asked to approve, and when you look at the criteria for site review, which is 173, was it 6?
I think the decision that was made is since nothing on the site is actually changing, the criteria were basically being waived.
We're being asked to approve presumably a building that doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it's not shown on the plan or it's not labeled on the plan. I mean, what we got is absurd. And then we've got this floor plan floating in the air. You know, we're being asked to approve a multifamily dwelling, and we have nothing. I had to go out and look at the tax card to see that what actually existed, and it's not clear to me whether it's the commercial building or whether it's the existing foundation.
Okay, well, actually, generally, we have applicants here, so because he's not here, I think we should continue it.
Well, you can only continue a hearing, not a case, so the board might just want to deny without prejudice, and it's up to the applicant to resubmit when they're ready.
So moved.
Yeah, I had one other question. That is
Okay,
in the
well,
letter.
just a second. He just made a motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. I'll second it. Okay, deny without prejudice. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead, Rogers.
My question was, in the letter accompanying the application,
I don't mean to cut you off. Since you just denied without prejudice, I don't know if people should be talking about it. I mean, I'm happy to meet after.
well, I have a question that goes to whether there needs to be an application. I'm not going to the merits of anything.
As long as that's said out loud, you go wherever you want.
But it says it was purchased in an existing 3-unit building. Are there 3 approved units in the building?
No.
Okay.
It was it was sold to them as a 3-unit building. There was no such thing on record.
Okay.
So and the discrepancy here is they have an existing structure, and we're looking to...
And this was a Paul Kimball venture?
Yes, yes. Effectively, what this application is without getting to site plan merits at all, this is authorizing the use of the second floor of an existing structure with no site changes. So that's why the application came in the way it did, and I understand it was confusing, but much more easily explained when the applicant's here. So I will let them know they need to resubmit.
Yes, because I was under the impression that the 2 units were all 2-floor, and that the 3rd unit they're looking for was just the 2nd floor. Is that?
I can go into detail individually outside of a quorum
Yeah,
format.
so that does need explaining, so,
Okay,
yeah.
we denied it without prejudice.
I mean, I think we need an application that meets the requirements, and if there are certain items to be waived, then there should be a request for the waiver.
Okay, all right. Can I see the agenda?
So as the board can probably see, there's a new person. Oh, you want to go through? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, I would like to, if that's, okay. So we're on to discussion items, the 2024 meeting schedules. Everybody okay with that?
I have one comment, and that is, I believe the November 2024 election is on November 5th, not November 12th.
I'm happy to confirm with the town clerk with any and all elections and make changes. Really, what you're looking at is just the first and third Tuesday. And if there are conflicts with voting days, those have to be amended.
Okay, so you're going to look into that then?
Yes, really the question is the board okay keeping the first and third Tuesday at 7 o'clock? And if that remains true, we'll continue from there.
Yes.
Well, except in November.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Well, there might be another election that gets,
Yeah.
that I'm not aware of.
Okay, all right.
In the future, is it possible to print out the calendar on a single page listing the dates
Yeah.
rather than 13
Right.
pages?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, all right, the planning board budget, Tavis has put this together. It's pretty much the same as it was last year. This is the 2024 budget for planning board. Anybody have any concerns about this?
My concern is, does this include sufficient funds for the planning board to be able to hire and keep a secretary capable of doing the job?
The short answer to that question is that position is not even being funded directly out of the planning board. This would be the planning board's contribution to that end. So I think the short answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So at the selectmen's meeting, they had a discussion about a circuit plan, excuse me. How would that fall in? Would that fall into this detail?
I don't believe so. I believe that would fall under the planning department if that was a line item in there. Not necessarily just this is just the planning board. Back for your ordinance. So that's where I would see that, John, myself. I don't know if Tavis wants to add to that or not, or has a different opinion, but.
I could have all sorts of opinions. It's scary for a full-time planner to hear that the selectmen are talking about going to a circuit rider planner. I don't know
Oh, no.
what that discussion had anything to do with.
That was an addition to you because you had too much work.
It would be fun to be made privy to conversations like that. I can't speak to that, but no, that's not included in the planning board budget.
Right.
Anything else? Okay. All right, we had talked about the, having a discussion about affordable housing and inclusionary zoning, and we talked about having it in mid-October, which would be October 17th. And we were going to put something in the paper in the form of a legal notice. Is that what we?
That's what's drafted, yes.
Yeah, right.
So if the board wants to amend, augment, et cetera.
I mean, this is something that the planning board said they wanted to do, so is this okay if we go ahead with this?
I would suggest that we insert the word "is" after board in the first line, and that we, in the second sentence, make it heard by the board as it considers zoning amendments, or either, or if you want to use the plural, have board members as they consider, but the board is amendments, so that we're grammatically correct.
Okay,
Sounds good to me.
all right. Is everybody okay with that?
Should this be mentioned that this is going to take place during a regular meeting? Is that true?
Well, this is. a
October
regular
17th is your
meeting.
workshop, yeah.
Yeah, but this was.
Could it say that in the notice a little bit? That it's not just this meeting?
It will be just that.
It will be.
That will be the topic of the meeting.
That'll be the topic,
Okay.
okay?
It's just confusing when people say, well, there was a special meeting. And I go, no, it was at the regular meeting time. See where I'm going there?
It doesn't say anything about a special meeting.
But it's in bold print, affordable housing, inclusionary zoning.
That's the discussion topic.
Right.
Yeah. What about the title, affordable housing inclusionary zoning? Everybody okay with that?
Wolfeboro Planning Board considers, or Wolfeboro Planning Board wants to hear your thoughts on affordable housing / inclusionary zone.
I'm not sure anybody will know what inclusionary zoning is, but I think affordable housing is what should bring people out.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, and then we can show them what we're thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, but then when we implement something and then it goes in the inclusionary zoning, we can address it then. But
Okay.
I think affordable housing is the big drawing card.
Okay. All right. Good. Is that okay, Tavis?
Well, yeah, I think, as Roger said, affordable housing is a big drawing card, but I think if you include inclusionary zoning, at least people will start to become familiar with that word, so it won't surprise them if they happen to see it on a warrant article.
Yeah, the affordable housing / inclusionary is where the board left off at your last meeting to how to advertise this, so it hasn't gone to the paper yet, so nothing's final.
Right. Okay, next item, comments to ZBA for special exception for 57 Crooked Pond Lane.
So I don't think I have to recuse myself from this, but that is a right-of-way that goes across my property, and I have no problem with them adding a garage.
No, you don't need to recuse yourself, you're not acting on it.
I know,
Just-
I know. I'm just saying out loud
Yeah.
who I am and why I'm saying it.
Okay,
So if it's not a road, what is it? Is it just a path?
It's a right-of-way.
It's a right to pass and repass.
The whole,
All
Crooked
four,
Pond.
all four houses, yeah.
Actually, the three, not the fourth.
And that bisects this lot.
Correct.
okay, so
Wait,
it
what
meets the,
bisects this lot?
meets the
No.
setbacks and coverage, right?
Yeah,
My understanding.
Okay, is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay, because we need to do comments here. Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, well, I had comment about
Okay,
runoff. I didn't see how it was going to impact the neighbors if it was. I don't know.
okay, so the runoff needs to be addressed? Yeah, okay, all right.
Well,
that's-
remember, the special exception being requested is the ability to have a permit issued.
Okay.
It's not
well,
saying the things like runoff and the such wouldn't be considered.
I mean, it seems that the garage is at the end of the driveway, like in the appropriate place to put it.
Okay, so appropriate place. Anybody else?
If you put it on the other side of the driveway, it'd be over the leach field, and that wouldn't be good.
Other location, each field. Anything else?
Is there something that I'm remembering about a detached garage?
Well, I assume it's an accessory structure.
So we still can do a detached garage.
Sure they can.
As long as they don't put an apartment in it.
Right,
Meets the setback, the side setback is 20 feet.
Yep.
Shows it. It's actually more than 20.
okay, so it meets the height requirements, the coverage requirements, appropriate place. Other location would be over the leach field, that would not be appropriate. And
It needs a shoreland permit.
need shoreland. And the runoff needs to be addressed.
Yeah, well, you could address that by giving a description of which way the roof was pitched, whether or not you were pitching it the front and the back, or the two ends.
Okay. So,
That's on the garage side. That's why I see more of the issue. You have
Okay.
more area on the four-bedroom rather than the proposed garage. And then you know, you have two aspects there, whether or not it will run down the driveway into Crooked Pond Road and follow the road down, or where it's gonna go, so,
Okay, so it needs to be addressed with
yeah, you
that.
gotta give us some details.
Well, this is going to go to ZBA.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. All right, is that okay, Tavis?
Fine.
Okay, we received a letter from Bill and Becky Swafield, concerns about Lone Wolf, and apparently they have been going past the 10 o'clock self-imposed deadline. I mean, they're the ones that suggested it. And then they called the police. The police didn't know anything about it. So they're sending the letter to us as an official complaint and ask that the board to see that this condition of approval is enforced.
So the condition of approval originally and in its last iteration was that if music were to be at Lone Wolf, it would be mainly indoors and unamplified. So with this letter, I know of one instance where it was outdoors and amplified, and yet they did comply with the noise ordinance at 10. So I don't see it as a direct violation of the condition, but if the board would like, we can draft a letter reminding them of the condition that the music be mainly indoors and unamplified.
What about the comment about saying that they had to stop by 10? Is that purely a noise ordinance?
That's a noise ordinance thing, and again, the noise ordinance really doesn't account for music.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So-
but I think that's what we had in mind when we
Well,
talked about
the
it.
condition the board added was using the applicant's words back at him and said, you said you were going to be indoors and not amplified, so do that.
I think when you look at page 3, it says Mike Carter stated the applicant has stated 175.138 of the application, and he would accept approval with the conditions.
Right.
And he agreed that if he did that, then he could have his revoked. That was how I recalled that night.
Yeah, it's,
In which case, that which would be revoked would be the outdoor seating. So if the board wants to go down that path based upon this letter, we can pursue that.
okay, all we're doing is going along with the conditions of approval that were given to this.
I'm
To the
asking the
Lone
board what
Wolf.
the board would like to do based on this letter.
I think
If you want to pursue revocation of the site plan amendment to allow outdoor seating, we can do that.
It has come to our attention that this violation took place, and please address it at your earliest convenience or something like that.
Well, I guess the question, Kathy, is do we want to agree that it is a violation? Because there's some discussion about that. Tavis has shown a possibility that it is not truly a violation.
Well,
What, that they were outside and
All
amplified?
we're saying
I'm sorry?
here is that it has come to our attention, and could he address this? That's
So
all we're saying.
Why don't we send something to the police department informing them of the conditions so that they are aware of it, since that's, I think, what they,
We're not aware.
Yeah, certainly I think it's appropriate to make the police aware of the condition of approval, so should there be an incident in the future, they'll be aware of what the planning board's intent was.
I'm questioning, though, that how could a singer be knowingly hired to sing, amplified outdoors, knowing that we had this?
Well, again, this gets to the wording of the restriction, which says mainly rather than solely. So it doesn't absolutely restrict either outdoor or amplified.
Does it say mainly?
it does seem to say it is to be confined within the building.
Before. Page 3.
But confined within the building.
Well, if we could.
If there is to be music, comma, confined within the building, comma, it shall be mainly non-amplified music, right? Remember, I went to Kingswood. Is that right?
Or you could read that to say that the music within the building has to be mainly non-amplified.
That too.
I recall
Correct.
it was non-amplified acoustic, which was to be required, and I'm questioning whether or not the minutes actually reflect the conversation to the T, because that's how I remember it, non-amplified acoustic music.
I mean,
And
it could be amplified if they got the doors closed and it's indoors in the winter.
There wasn't a problem with it playing inside and having the doors open. That was their right. Again, it was when they were outside.
Lighten up the world.
That's where you cross the.
How about a letter be drafted letting the individual be made aware of the complaint that was submitted and allow them time to address it, and they can come before the board if there's questions on that condition? If they fail to comply with the board's ultimate directive on that, the board can proceed with the revocation of the site plan approval that allows the outdoor seating.
Could we also tie into that the reminder to move all their outdoor seating before snow? They didn't do that last year. They just left it in place.
That wasn't a part of the condition.
Yeah,
It is part of the
you added
conditions.
it.
I don't really see any need for the applicant to come in front of us. Again, we
Right.
set the standard, we asked him to do something, he said he would do it, and I think what the planner should do is, planner should send him a letter and say, look, these are the conditions, we'll give you one more chance, and after that, you're jeopardizing your outdoor seating.
I would suggest that we let we say that there has been a complaint that we've been made aware of, and non-compliance with the conditions of approval would jeopardize the outdoor seating. I don't know that at this point I would limit it to one more chance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could we enclose a copy of the minutes for them, just to be nice?
I'm going to give them a copy of what the town received.
No, I mean.
No,
copy of these
yes,
minutes.
that's what the town
Right.
received, so they would get a copy of it.
Oh,
Right.
the whole letter and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think Doug's suggestion is a good one.
Yep, got it.
If you could send the letter and copy the police so that they know what's going on. Okay.
What do you need a motion on that?
No.
No, you want to make one?
I would support Doug's recommendation for a letter to be sent to Lone Wolf stating the facts that he's agreed to.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you've got a piece of paper in here that says questions to ask before project approval to limit impacts on surface waters. This came from the Wolfeboro waters, and all it really is for us as individual planning board members, when we're looking at site plans or subdivisions, to think of these questions and be sure that they're addressed. Because it all has to do with runoff, and that's what we're trying to control. So that's really all this is, but it would be good if people could, pay attention to it and really ask the questions when the right time is here, like with Brewster, I guess. So, everybody okay with this?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So are they going to come back with some wording? They had that document where they changed it all over, and we asked them to.
Yes, that's the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, they are. Well, no, we're going to discuss it.
I know, but they were supposed to separate their wording so that it was so. I thought they were going to rewrite something and then give that to us, showing that what they wanted for wording was compared to the wording that existed already and how it would be changed.
Okay, I think he submitted that, but you said you didn't have it. I'll get it out and send it to everybody. Okay. All right, the minutes. I'm not sure how we should proceed, but I do know that the planning board did approve the May 16th minutes, and we did that on July 18th. So we've still got June 6th, and that one, I did add Roger's comments to this because he was the only one that had comments. Then we've got the 11th, the 18th, and August 15th. And what I would propose that we just approve these for filing at the clerk's office, if people are comfortable doing that.
Well, on the August 15th minutes, there are a couple of changes I would like to make.
Okay.
In particular, where incorrect names were used.
Okay. All right.
There are several instances throughout the document where Harriman Hill, the word Harriman, is misspelled either Herman or Harriman, and I don't think that's pertinent. However, on fourth page, about 3/4 of the way down, it reads, over the last 7 years, she'd worked with Dual Real Estate. It should be Dow Real Estate.
Yep.
At the bottom of the next page, the bottom bullet, it reads, Mr. Reese asked you to please respond. It should be Mary DeVries, or Miss DeVries, rather.
What page you on?
The fifth page, bottom of the fifth page.
Yep.
I'm sorry?
Page 5?
Page 5.
Says one of the biggest changes?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
The third line in that bullet reads Chamber of Commerce, comma, Mr. Rees. It should say Miss DeVries. And then at the very last line, it says also resident Ed Maris. It should say E.D. Damaris. And then on the next page, middle of the page.
Wait, and this is page 6?
Yes, page 6. Middle of the page, it says Chair K. Barnard says, would anybody else like to speak? It should be Dee Breskin, Vice Chair. It was me speaking, not Kathy, since she had recused herself.
You know, people are getting us confused, right?
Because we look so alike.
It's an easy mistake.
Yeah.
In any case, it was me speaking, not Kathy. And then about 2/3 of the way down on page 7, where I'm speaking, and I starts out with, I think that's correct, it should read coordinate with staff relative to, rather than step relative, because I think it's a direct relation.
I think, and in the paragraph right above that, it says, the applicant shall post unacceptable financial surety. I think that should be acceptable.
Are you getting these, Tavis? Are you getting? Yeah, okay.
It's on the video.
And I think where my comment is on that same page, that the and should be followed by drainage.
And then again, on the same page, Roger makes comment, and the other comments, they're also going to include, it reads receipt of the disruption of terrain. It should be alteration of terrain. I know how disruptive Roger is, but it wasn't in this case. On page 8, near the bottom, now we're talking about the Brewster application, so Kathy has reseated herself. She says, okay, so they're going to be unused is what it reads, but it should be in use, which is sort of the opposite. So replace unused with in use.
I just found the paragraph beginning with Andy Smith nonsensical. I mean, it was, to find any relationship to what actually occurred took a lot of work.
Okay, where are you, Roger? Are
I'm
you
on
still
page 8 under Andy Smith. I mean, it's just,
I think Roger's saying that whole paragraph
Yeah.
of Andy's comments
Yep.
read poorly.
Did you read any of mine? I sound stupider than I really am.
Then I think more importantly, since we're on the topic of Brewster and since we finished that today, on page 12, at the beginning of public comments, Dennis Schauer gets up to read. First of all, it says neighbor on South Main Street, and it doesn't say his name, so I think his name should be added. It's Dennis Schauer. And then it reads here, it's a pretty disruptive temporary facility. He actually said disturbing, not disruptive. And then he goes on to say, what it reads in the minutes is, there's lots of debris that lands on my grass. It should say, there's lots of banging that goes on, the puck hits the glass. The next line reads, I would say that from a labor standpoint, it should say a neighbor standpoint. And that's all I got.
Did you go back to the video to watch this?
I did.
You did? Oh.
Can you give Tavis that copy?
Sure, I'm happy to
okay.
share the copy
All
in a
right.
minute.
That would be
I've
good.
highlighted it and written in the comments that I made.
Okay, so we've got the minutes of June 6th with Roger's comments.
Have we received revised minutes?
No, we haven't. That's why I'm going through this.
So,
And suggesting that we just simply file these and let's go on with things.
I think one of the problems with the June 6 minutes is it includes none of the public input, which is significant.
I know, but that's the way it was presented to us. And
If the board would like, minutes can be revisited at any time. There's no official approval process. So for now, I think if you want to approve them, that's fine. Revisions can be made and resubmitted to the board for consideration, if you'd like that done.
Are you saying to have them rewritten?
I don't believe
No.
they've been rewritten. I
No,
have not received any
I don't think we should do
revisions.
that.
No, certainly there's an option to rewrite them, but I don't think anybody is suggesting that should happen.
Right.
Normally, we approve the minutes like we just went through these August 15th ones, that would have a motion to approve them as amended.
Yeah, okay,
And
I'll
then
make that
we don't need to
motion.
see them again after that. We know that our
Yeah.
amendments have been recorded.
Okay,
They become
I'll make the
attached.
motion to approve on August 15th minutes as corrected by Doug and Roger.
I second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, all right, and the rest of these, do you, how do you want to proceed? Can we just file them?
On the July 18th minutes, did you seat only Julie, or was there a second alternate seated so that we had a full complement of 7?
Steve Webster was here also. Let's see. Six.
And then there's
I'm not trying to torture people. I'm just trying to move on. And, I mean, everybody's had all these, so.
So you could do a motion for 6.6, 7.11, and 7.18 as amended.
So moved.
Okay, well, okay.
I second that.
No, you can't right now. I'll second it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all right, you're going to give Tavis
Yes.
yours, and I'll give him this one with Roger's comments.
Okay?
Okay, all right, anything else? Can we adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, folks.